Hey everybody, this is DJ and welcome to Architects of Imagination, a game dev podcast where we talk to the brilliant minds behind your favorite video games. And today, this is Dave Taylor. He is a pioneering programmer. They're in the early days of id Software. We contributed to several of id's early titles, their hits, including Doom, Doom 2, and the original Quake. Dave has since gone on to work on other titles such as Lord of the Rings, Battle for Middle-earth, Fallout New Vegas, and a PS4 reboot of the classic and beloved Apple II game, Jordan Mechner's Karateka. He's also gone on to foster the next generation of game developers as a professor, and outside of game dev, Dave is just a fascinating person all around, and every conversation I have with him is, well, you'll see. Welcome to Architects of Imagination, Dave.
Hey, man.
Very good
Shit,
to have you.
shit, no pressure.
No pressure, don't fuck it up.
Yeah. All right.
So before you worked at id, tell us the first time you saw Wolfenstein 3D. I remember it being revolutionary for its time. What went through your head when you first saw and or played it?
I don't remember exactly the first time. I do remember being in my apartment with a shitty little cafeteria table desk with a PC. I think it was a 386. And I remember cracking out on it to the point where I was farting profusely because it made me sick, and gassing out my roomie. And but I kept pushing myself. Well, oh, I don't feel so good, but I could play a little bit further, you know.
Yeah.
And then that actually was my kind of my gateway into working at id because um, I was doing some game journalism on the side, some early online game journalism where it
Okay.
came on a floppy disk.
Wow.
And I was reviewing games for this thing called Game Bites. It was started by Ross Erickson, the guy who started Xbox Live. Um, and I ran out of games to review because I was like, any asshole can review a game. Now I'm going to interview my heroes, and that was the local ones, Richard Garriott and Chris Taylor, and then I was out of local legends. So I was like, hey, I just made myself sick playing this Wolfenstein 3D game. I should talk to those guys because I'm actually fighting my own physiology to enjoy this. So, so it was a really cool like group phone call thing.
Okay.
Um,
Who did you get on?
the whole fucking team, it sounded like. I think it was like Jay and Carmack and Romero and a bunch of guys. And I just remember that there was this one guy who was answering all the geeky questions. And there was this other guy who was like really friendly. And the super friendly guy was Jay. And the super geek guy was Carmack.
Yeah.
And when I asked stuff like, "Well, how did you get direct access to the frame buffer on the next step box?" And he was like, "Well, actually, we didn't." Uh, and so he's helping me, hooking me up with all those questions. And then after not long after that interview, I sent a whiny little email to Carmack saying, "Oh, gee, how do I get in the game industry?" So it was just
Young
good
man,
timing.
come on
Yeah.
over.
Come on in.
Was that it? Like, was there an interview process?
Yeah, yeah. So I was making games on the side in college as a sort of a contest. It was like this annual thing where we would make a game in secret for a year. And then we would invite a bunch of fancy pants coders from different colleges to show up to write AI to play the game on their behalf. And they would get about 12, 16 hours to write the code. And then it was hands off the keyboard, and the AIs all beat each other up in the game. And they don't know about the game until, the day of and all that. So that we were doing all that on Unix workstations, and it was like big, 48 player games, 16 teams of three type games. And that was back before networked real time games were, this was like 1990.
Yeah.
So that wasn't really a thing one would do, making games on Unix, much less that many players. And so when I interviewed with id, maybe there was some cool that rubbed off on me from that because they hadn't yet implemented even like four player. multiplayer yet. So so I don't know. You'd have to ask Carmack why the hell he hired me. I don't know why. I still don't know fucking why. But
Well, you can program, and you made an impression, as it sounds like.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
And my memory, like Wolfenstein 3D was one of the first like proper 3D games. I remember, before that I was playing like SSI Dungeons and Dragons games and Might and Magic and Bartel. Yes. Oh, where like you would advance one like square at a time, and you would like turn 90 degrees. But this now you can like, oh my god, like with a mouse you can
Yeah,
go anywhere. But it
yeah.
wasn't the first 3D textured game. There was Eye of the Beholder in 1991, I think might have been the first one. Ultima Underworld came out in 92, which is right around the same time as Wolfenstein 3D.
Now the way I heard it from either Carmack or Romero or somebody, one of the idsters, um, they actually someone at Origin actually showed them, hey, check out this game we're working on, and it was Underworld.
Okay.
And Carmack was like, oh, that's fucking cool, but I could do that even better. And then he made Wolfenstein and he shipped it before they shipped
Oh man.
Underworld. So he kind of fucking scooped him.
Yeah.
Uh, the game industry is rife with that. Like, oh yeah, let me show you what I can do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, that was like that little moment in time was a massive leap forward in video games. I mean, before that, everything was just sprites and tiles and scrolling stuff. But like,
Yeah, Doom, I think, really in particular got kind of like the frame rate and the big leap in presentation and a really strong IP at the same time because that really isn't that common. You saw lots of weak IP, and Doom is strong. You
yeah,
know,
the
like
logo, like
the
everything.
logo, the just very clear vision of Hellspawn and Space Marines. Like we're fucking doing this,
Yeah,
and we're going heavy metal about it. We're not making any bones bare. We're we're just gonna go what you think we're gonna do, and we're gonna scare the shit out of you. And everything was so, I thought anyway, so beautifully aligned, even more so than Quake, in my opinion, or
yeah,
Wolfenstein. Although Wolfenstein's pretty fucking good too.
yeah. And it's funny too. Like you think of the leap. You consider generation jumps these days, right? Like
Uh,
this last one going from to the PS5 and the X.
yeah.
I hate their naming is so the
Oh
Xbox.
man, but we're in store for another fatty with AI, aren't we? Mm.
Yeah, yeah. We're talking a bit about like where things are going now, but like, all
Yeah.
right, we just went from like 1080 graphics to like 4K, but like, if and faster drive rates, but like going from the original like Castle Wolfenstein on Apple II to like, yeah,
Or
this.
Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which had that really smooth feedback. It was just tighter.
Oh yeah, man. And I remember Wolfenstein, just
Uh,
like the tension of that game was
oh,
nothing like it, right? Like,
nothing like it. Schutzstaffel!
yeah, it was.
Uh,
Yeah, it gave you a panic
mm,
attack.
yeah.
So before you were hired at id, you were studying electrical engineering in Austin.
Yeah, yeah.
How did you make the jump? You talked about how you interviewed Carmack and everything, but were you studying programming on the side? Were you teaching yourself? Tell us about that. How did you?
Yeah, I mostly taught myself in high school and on an Apple IIe, which is why we have this shared religion of growing up on Ultima
Yeah.
and all those great games. I think you were just talking about Archon.
Literally
And
got my C64 right here. Like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, granted, you can be forgiven your C64. That was part of the religion, right? It was us versus them. But but yeah, learned a lot on that. Learned mostly just reading books, pre-internet, right? And the Apple IIe technical reference manual was a real nugget. And and then yeah, learned on. Then I would go into work sometimes and play on my dad's PC at work. that was in college. I'm sorry, in high school as well a bit, and then in college I got to work on these Unix, these Sun workstations that were running SunOS before Solaris had come along, and that was my primary like becoming one with a programming environment. And so I became very command line oriented then.
Sure. Yeah. I just watched a video on the rise and fall of Sun Microsystems and what took them down. That was a little fascinating.
Grand old company.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were like they were, worth billions at one point, and then a few years later they are not in existence.
We'll have to touch on scalar money commerce at some point in this call.
Yeah. Totally. Um, tell us about your time at id. What were the games that you worked on while you were there? What systems were you responsible for?
I was supposed to come on to do the Sega Genesis port of Wolf 3D. And he actually wanted me to come on before I had finished my electrical engineering degree. I was still taking my senior lab. And so it was me fighting off Carmack saying,
Quit college, come work.
quit college with one fucking class left, right? Quit college and come do this thing. I was like, so I was like busy trying to read the technical docs on the Sega Genesis while finishing my senior lab and like trying to get, everything out the door. And then I finally finish and I show up and he's like, fuck that. We're late on Doom. Work on that instead. I was like, okay. I actually felt like I dodged a bullet because by the time I was done with that technical manual, I was like, this thing sucks. So I was pretty stoked to be on the PC, but I was still a fish out of water because I was, like I said, I was a Unix weenie, and so I was thrust into like my first, real time DOS game, and yeah, wasn't familiar with the Watcom compiler, wasn't familiar with DOS 4GW or the whole idea that you would have to extend DOS to make a 32-bit addressable memory process work, and like I mean, I just felt a little weird. But they were using Next Step as well. And that was sort of like the gateway drug for me. So I was like, oh, okay, so this is calming. And I can do most of my development on there. And then I really treated DOS sort of like I would treat a circuit board on a workbench, just like this really stupid test thing. I
Yeah.
wouldn't actually be productive on it. I would just run builds on it, right? And then I would hang it and then reboot it and then build and then hang and then reboot. It was a lot of that.
Yeah. So for Doom, what subsystems of the game did you end up working on?
Let's see. On Doom, it was the status bar. It was the screen transitions between the levels. It was those level transitions as well, but the melty effect. It was integrating all the sound effects and the sound library into the engine, cheat codes, the automap when you hit tab. It's a bunch of random shit. I kind of thought of myself as the spackle coder. John Carmack had done all the ouchie hard 3D shit. Uh,
Yeah.
and I was sort of leftover boy.
Okay. And how many coders were there? There was so Carmack and Romero were both
Yeah,
programmers.
so I wasn't there for the whole thing, but so that's a good question for them. Carmack seems like he did the bulk of it. He was the primary coder when I was there for sure. Romero had pretty much switched to level design the whole time when I was
Okay.
there, but I think Romero was still making changes to the level editor. But yeah, better questions for
Okay.
Romero. I know that really for coding, I was only interacting with Carmack, and it felt like we were the only two banging on it. And then Paul Radek was doing the sound library. That poor fucker, goddamn, like, you know, to ship a game back then, right? You had to finish writing the operating system essentially, because there are no audio drivers.
Yeah.
And so that poor guy had to write them to support all the cards we needed. And I remember him really suffering at the hands of all the little issues, the states you find these sound cards in.
Yeah, and eventually, like, DirectX comes along and kind of gives you an abstraction layer from all that. But so I'm thinking back to like 386 computers, and like there was the system speaker, which you could, oscillate. But I'm trying to think back. There were sound cards being
Yeah,
sold.
it was definitely Sound Blaster era, right?
Yep.
And so on Quake, when I rewrote the audio engine from scratch, um, I was like, I don't want to suffer any of this zillion sound card crap. So I was like, I'm just going to do this for Sound Blaster compatible cards, which by then was kind of everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And then just to make it even more like happy-go-lucky, I made it totally synchronous instead of having an IRQ handler for filling the sound buffer. Um, and that just makes it a little easier to debug and less likely to hang the entire system, that kind of thing. And but I think Carmack may have replaced that before it shipped. But last I spoke to Jake Simpson, he goes, "No, Dave, your code's all over that shit." I was like, "Okay." I honestly don't know, and I haven't kept up with it. But that's my memory of it.
It's funny too, like, fast forward way into the future, I'm working at Infinity Ward, and the editor is Radiant, which is, I think, in the early Quake days, like that editor was didn't sort of make it through, but I think Quake 3 was the version
Yeah,
of Radiant that then went on to get licensed, and was the beginning of the Call of Duty engine. I'm like,
it's
that
wild how much this stuff gets reused.
and it's so long ago.
Yeah,
But almost everything in it's been sort of torn out and redone
sure, sure.
at this point.
Refactored many times over.
Yeah. Do you have any funny anecdotes or memories from your time at id that may not be common knowledge that you could talk about? I'm sure there were a ton of stupid shit going on.
I mean, yes. Now I'm editing for suitability.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sure.
that's pretty open ended. I'll have to noodle on that.
Okay.
Uh,
Maybe we can come
but
back to that one.
yeah, maybe something will bubble up.
Okay, we'll pass on that.
Maybe something safer than what initially bubbled up will bubble up.
Fair enough. So you weren't there for a ton of time, just about 2 years, is that right?
Yeah, like 2 or 3 years, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
After you left, did you have any regrets about it? Can you say why you bounced after? I mean, that was kind of a
No, actually, yeah. So I was obviously crazy honored to be a part of that whole thing, and learned like crazy on Doom and Quake from Carmack. I mean, you can imagine just having him as sort of like a teacher as a
yeah.
coder fresh out of school, right? Not so much as like a teacher, like, hey, let me show you how to do this. He wasn't very much like that, but just his code he just writes really good code. And so that was a great influence on me. What was the question again?
Do you regret leaving
Oh, do I regret anything?
there New York Rise, and why did you leave if you can say?
Oh no, yeah. So actually, yeah, I was going to say that's right. So I so initially when I got there, Sandy Peterson and I got there at the same time. I said, "Hey, I want to work somewhere where I have a piece of the equity, right?" They're like, "Yeah, sure. Let's talk about that in 6 months." 6 months came and went, and they decided against it, and they cited that they had, a negative experience with it in the past, and it sounds like there had been a bit of a trail of blood with former owners that they had to let go, and they had this sort of buy-sell agreement, which made it really expensive to fire someone with equity, or if they left, right, because they had to buy it all back.
Yeah.
Um, and so I understood, but at the same time, it was code for like, yeah, we figured out who you are. You're just a mere mortal coder, or I think I would have gotten away with that. Anyway, that came out. I said, hey, look, that's no problem, but do you mind if I invest in my own game developer? Just because having a stake in that is important to me. And they said, sure, yeah, just make sure you're not coding. It's not a 3D game. And I was like, yeah, no problem. And so that's why I invested in crack.com and we made Abuse. And so that was very fulfilling. And by the time I left, I was pretty burnt out at id, just because by then the offices had changed. The company had grown a bit, and the office had changed. We were all in this fucking awful bullpen. Like, it's one big room. The whole fucking dev team was in there, all facing the walls. And I know this is like the modern dream, and some people love this shit. I cannot stand it. And so I felt like I was like, I hate this whole fucking scene. Do not like. Um, and so that was not appealing. And then one day I got one of my royalty checks from Abuse, and I was like, look at all the fucking zeros on that thing. I was sort of left it on my keyboard to kind of look at it from a range. And I was like, okay, that's looking a lot sexier to me, going off and doing my own little adventure than sitting in this bullpen. And Quake just wasn't as exciting to me as Doom because Quake seemed sort of like a browner Doom with fewer bad guys. And it wasn't working for me. I didn't like the IP didn't feel as strong. Like I didn't like the whole kind of Shub Niggurath kind of vibe to that Lovecraftian thing. I love Sandy. He's like one of my favorite people on earth. But just as an IP, it just wasn't resonating with me. And
Okay.
I was getting distracted by, the abuse stuff. And so I think it was just mutually timed. And I was technically said, Carmack and American took me out to dinner at Royal Tokyo. I said, Dave, I thought it was an odd choice to bring American. I think American was there for moral support. But Carmack said, yeah, Dave, I think maybe after Quake, we should part ways. And I was like, actually, I was thinking after Q test because I was kind of like excited about getting on with abuse stuff. So we're like, yeah, that's great. So I think we both felt like it was just going that way.
Okay. Did you have any regrets after it or no?
You know, I think I had regrets because I got caught up in chasing money and I was like, wow, that was some easy fucking money. And if I had played it this way, I could have ridden that because I watched all the other guys that went to id ride the big money train.
Yeah.
And I saw how it was done. I saw that it was just a little bit of politics and a lot of hard work and just, putting all your everything into it. But I've never been that kind of person. I've always been sort of fitful, bursty, passionate, but in sort of like, bursts, right? And so I can be counted upon for bursty little spurts. But I think they really are, at least at the time, they were more after like these marathon sprinters, right? They were
Yeah.
like, let's fucking nose to the grindstone of this stuff. And it's just, at the time, I was fighting that part of myself. And so I was kicking myself a little bit over that. But yeah, I super don't regret it now. I also know that kind of approach comes with more gray hair,
Yeah.
and I am 54, and this has not died. Uh, Granted, I have no kids, so
Yeah. I'll give an anecdote on leaving a company that during a boom. So I was at Bungie for Halo 3. My circumstances there were kind of weird because I was part of FASA who shut down, so I was kind of on loan to Bungie. I wasn't technically a Bungie employee, but I had my termination got extended, so I could help with that. And then what I didn't know behind this, I was trying to get them to just hire me on full time. I'm like, the game's not done. I'm still here,
yeah.
and but there was just weird, technical HR stuff, like my termination date that got extended then ended. And I'm like, okay, well just hire me. You need effects, and I'm here to do them. Let's
What do
go.
you say? Yeah.
What I didn't know behind the scenes, and man, were they tight-lipped, that they were in the middle of leaving Microsoft. That's when that happened. So they
Oh,
had a no solicit thing. They couldn't hire me if they wanted to.
I
And they
see.
and they also couldn't tell me that. So I was like, so they offered me like a contract, and I'm like,
That's funny.
like
So were they doing things like we can't hire you now?
nope, they were so tight-lipped, and
Yeah.
man, and so I walked away. I told him no to this contract, uh, and I then sat in my room for 4 months and watched Battlestar Galactica. I'm like, what did this do? I just walked away from like what was my dream job at the time, but it led to me going to Infinity Ward and doing pretty gangbusters there. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I certainly, yeah, I know I have zero regrets. I am filled with nothing but gratefulness for every goddamn morning I wake up these days.
hell yeah, that's great.
Uh,
Do you stay in touch with any of the old id guys?
nope, not really.
Not really. I did a game with Romero maybe just a couple years back, Empire Sin. We were doing some effects on that.
How was it?
Um, yeah, it was fun. It was a cool game, like a Chicago gangster themed, turn-based. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Nice.
Paul, did you overlap Paul Steed at all?
No, I didn't get a taste of the steed. I heard the legends. They sounded very colorful.
Yeah, he was a colorful guy. He must have been probably just after you left.
I
And
think
yeah,
so. He was a Quake 3 guy. Quake, was he there for Quake 2 as well?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but he I didn't know who he was at the time, but his after his time at id, he went to work at Wild Tangent, and he and I started the same week, and we became kind of buddies for a while. But yeah, he's a
Wow, that's a crazy buddy.
colorful guy. Yeah.
Yeah. See,
Talk about
those are the really colorful stories, and I don't know you know who you should, boy, you know who if you want to get all the best stories, you need to interview Mike Wilson.
okay. We'll hit him up next.
Or really even better, Donna.
I remember Paul telling me like the real reason I left id was I won't get into that, but
I'm sure there's all kinds of crazy stories like that. I mean, it's a lot of young dudes doing young dude shit, and it kind of manufactured some drama along with some brilliant games.
yeah, I'll bet. Talk for a minute about the cheat codes in Doom. There's some fun ones that continued on. Do you have any memories of those? What led to them? Because I mean, when you're developing them, it kind of comes down to like I'm making the game. I need to test stuff faster, so you put them in, right? And then they
Yeah.
kind of ship. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was fresh out of college and young and vain. So when it came time to add cheat codes, um, I was slipping in my own personal references because that made me feel special. Uh, so, so for instance, on the automap, you would type IDDT, or is it IDDT? I can't remember. To toggle through the reveal modes,
And if I
and
can
that's
if I can guess where this is going, what's your middle name?
it is not does not start with a D actually.
No, okay. What does DDT come from
But
then?
I don't actually share it publicly
Okay.
because it is a great way to identify me, and I actually love the warm blanket of anonymity that is my uselessly non-unique name.
Yeah, mine too.
Uh,
David
yeah,
Johnson is
right.
as
Uh,
generic as it gets.
it's awesome. Yeah, but I've always used DDT as an online moniker
Okay.
because it's kind of like the boom pesticide. Now, other people were thinking, you mean like the wrestling move? I was like, no, the wrestling move came from the pesticide. Okay, okay, we're going back to toxic roots of DDT. Anyway, that's where that came from, and of course, that was developed in my bedroom at a young age when the hormones were just kicking.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, let's get personal for a minute, if you don't mind. Can we talk about your feet?
My feet?
Yeah.
By all means.
So
Would you
you're
would
no,
you like to observe my feet?
so
Is this a first for architects of the imagination?
I think it is. Yeah. So
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, so I think this might be a reference to the fact that I am not often shod.
that's right. And
Okay.
for viewers who aren't
Yeah.
aware of this term,
Yeah, so that's the old way of saying walking about with shoes on. So I walk barefoot in public, but I live in Santa Monica, 4 blocks from the beach, so it's not too out of place. But it is kind of out of place. And there is that sort of, is he homeless or is he just scary look that people give me. It does give me a perspective on what it must be like to have enormous breasts because people try to hide that they're staring at my feet as they walk by me. And I'm like, oh, I know that move. I know that move really well. And
My eyes
and
are up
that
here.
uh, I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. Hey, up here, people. Yeah, my eyes are up here. And but no, yeah. So I started barefoot walking because I was running down. I used to have a workout that I would run down to Old Muscle Beach, which is on the Santa Monica Pier. And I'd run down there, work out, run back, or walk back, and then stuff my face. And I gave myself what's that horrible thing that you plantar fasciitis
Okay.
running there. And I was a cripple after that, and it was from one of those nice running shoes with the nice thick padding. And then I did a bunch of homework on what I should be wearing for shoes, and the research said you shouldn't be wearing shoes. It's actually better for your arches. My arches have always been fallen, and it strengthens your arches not to wear shoes. And I very quickly found out it had all these psychological benefits for me because it felt like I'd been walking around my whole life wearing mittens. And then someone said, you can take those off if you want and touch things and feel them and feel your environment around you. Really? Right? And so walking became this completely different thing where now, and it really had a bunch of things folded into it. Now, to walk barefoot, you have to watch every goddamn step, right? Because you can't step in glass
Yeah.
and you don't want to step in wet things because that's how to get exciting little parasites in you, right? And so you avoid those two things. That means you walk during the day, right?
Yeah.
And so because you're focused on literally just the step right in front of you, it's literally not a metaphor anymore. You're actually in the present. You're living in the moment. And it's a great way to in a way relax and get some distance from this shit going through your head. So walks that used to be contemplative became even better because strangely it I'm not allowed to let my mind wander because then I don't focus on my feet. But by focusing on my feet, somehow things occur to me unbidden that are like answers to problems. So yeah, there's all these nice benefits. And then after a while, your soles get really thick. And then you start craving certain sensations. And so like there's certain textures I like angle for. Like there's these gratings that they run power under or something in Santa Monica that just have this nice little pattern. And it's like a little foot massage. But yeah, that's one of the things I love about it. The other thing I love about it is like, especially walking on a cold day, but the sun's out because
Yeah.
the ground is warm. And it's so cool. So, yeah, about my bare feet. That's my bare feet. I've been doing that for a few years. I got a new tetanus shot on the insistence of my mother.
Okay.
Um,
That's good. Now, you mentioned, kind of the something of a meditative state you can get in while doing that too, and answers come to you. I heard a thing recently about y- like why it is that things will come to you while you're in the shower or walking barefoot or something like that, and it seems to make sense to me. Like if I'm at a computer trying to solve a problem, like your brain is in a certain mode, it's in a certain state, and so the neural pathways it's going to, if you're blocked on it, the neural pathways that are not the solution, that it is basically just keeps trying to repeat those over and over again. You kind of need to like it's going to come to you when your brain is not trying to solve the problem in that way, getting in the shower, going through a walk, or just doing something else when you're not you're not pushing,
Yeah,
you're not applying pressure to that same problem in the same way anymore,
yeah,
allows it to like navigate other neural pathways and like bling, connect the solution.
yeah. It's like I'm gonna put this in the background, let it do its thing. It's like pushing it off to the cloud and it kind of comes back.
Yeah.
And it's reliable, man. The shit that comes to me in the shower, like I depend on that stuff to get my job done. Like, I'm like, boy, I sure hope a night's sleep does something for me because I've got nothing. And then I wake up and it's like,
Yeah,
there are the answers.
it's right there. Yeah, that
Uh,
happens to me all the time. Um, Tell me, you've got some other strong convictions on topics that are important to you: diet, carbon footprint.
oh,
Can you talk
David,
about
you
that a
know
little
me
bit?
so well.
What led to those? What are some of them?
So I'm vegan, by choice, primarily for the environmental footprint, but the animal cruelty thing is nice too. And gluten-free, not by choice, because I developed an allergy late in life, and it's really painful, sadly. And I love good bread. I love good food. I lose my mind over good food. Um, and I shower less. I take a shower once or twice a week now, with a bath, and really I rinse my hair very thoroughly. But I don't use soap anymore, except once every month or two. Um, and So yeah, and then I store my gray water and I garden with it. And I'm very, yeah, and I got rid of my car and I don't fly anymore. And I'm basically just, and then I don't use heat or air conditioning. And I leave all my windows open, and then I just sort of bundle up um, as kind of my approach to things. And yeah, I'm just a big fan of like, um, I don't have the, it was interesting, my first job being id Software and seeing what these atlases of industry look like, how hard they work and how brilliant they are. And to realize early on, that's not me. These guys are amazing. Um, but what can I do to change the world that is not so like whatever the fuck you're engineered to do with your metabolism or however the hell you're raised, turn a machine like that. And I was like, well, at least I can set an example and say, as one guy, this is how I minimized everything. And maybe this example will inspire you. And I am really religious about it. I won't, if you're eating with me, I will push you to come to the vegan restaurant because I will want
Yeah.
to pour more money their direction, right? And so, but I don't preach about it because like 90% of my life I wasn't vegan, right? So I'm certainly not on any kind of pedestal I can speak from, but I'm really excited by how much choice is starting to show up, and I'm still personally frustrated by the tiny intersection of vegan and gluten-free food. But in Santa Monica, there's several tasty options for me to crack out on food over. So yeah, those are some of my personal environmental
Awesome.
choices and
Now,
why I made them.
is does I hadn't really thought about that. Does vegan food and wheat intersect most of the time? Is that yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like wheat makes everything taste unbelievably good. Is the problem. That's the problem. Um, and apparently the American variety of it or something, because apparently it's not as big a problem in Europe as it is here.
Yeah.
We get a lot more people developing this late stage allergy to it. And because we got a nice big shot glass of Roundup with every cup of wheat we got or something. I don't know what it was, but anyway, yeah, it's just, it's a delicious food, and we've gotten really, really good at making things with it. Now, it's not very good for you in general. I mean, it's not bad for you generally, except for, I think, maybe bad for your cilia and your small intestine or something. I think it can put them under strain under a lifetime of work. But I know plenty of people that go their whole lives eating bread and they're fine. So,
Yeah.
anyway, I think it's just one of those things where like you get all these recipes and people are used to making shit with milk and eggs and wheat and all this stuff. And we just need some time to learn how to develop these new recipes with stuff that's more environmentally suitable and a little healthier for us. And I'm really excited about what's happening with cultivated meats very soon.
Yeah, Impossible Burgers and all that.
No, I'm talking about cultivated meats. Those are simulated meats. Cultivated meats is where you start with actual uh, meat, muscle cells of meat
Okay,
from an
yeah.
animal, and then you grow them in a. They can actually take over old breweries and use that same equipment to
Wow.
grow cultivated meat. Yeah,
No, I didn't know about
and
that.
that's the big answer. Yeah, Israel's going big on it, and that's the big sushi answer to us vegans.
Awesome. Yeah, I know my wife's started buying pasta like directly imported from Italy and not like American versions of it anymore. Um, Let me ask you this too about carbon footprints, an important thing too. Is it possible to, do you know anyone who has just on an individual level gotten carbon neutral?
No, fuck that, man. I know a dude. I know a dude who got his whole fucking country carbon negative, motherfucker.
Wait, where's that?
And it gets better than that. It's not only the king of Bhutan, but do you know what his name is?
What is his name?
His name's King Wangchuck.
An awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So he is an actual hereditary king, and he just got super ape shit hardcore about making his country environmentally sustainable. Made something like over 60% of the land a giant nature preserve, figured out all of the land passages that the animals needed, designed around that very carefully, thought everything through in the economy. He's a real example. So yeah, there's definitely people out there that are like pushing the bleeding edge, right?
Amazing, amazing. And how about you personally? Is that a goal of yours? Do you want to get there, or are you there?
Yeah. So yeah, my larger goal. And now we come to it. Um, the meaning of life. Let's get down to
Yeah.
it. The meaning of life, as I understand it, is to maximize entropy within the narrow energy bands and environments that we're adapted to survive and thrive in. Now, to that end, we can maximize entropy, right? If we preserve our environment as long as possible, so we can have lots of generations of people maximizing entropy, right? And if we fizzle out quickly, then we will have failed our job. Um, and so, uh, because of that, um, I want us to survive long term. And I've determined that the greatest threat to our survival is what I call scalar money commerce,
Okay.
uh, which what other people like to call capitalism sometimes for short. But I very specifically am referring to the transaction, a typical transaction, saying, well, for this product or good will be sold for a price, which is a scalar. And a scalar is a fancy number for one number versus a vector, which can be many numbers. And the idea of reducing the formally recognized value of a good or service down to a single number is absurd on the face of it. And it's like saying, "Hi, my name's Dave Taylor, and what you can do to get a really good summary of my values, you can take a picture of me, right? And you can just average all the pixels down to this sort of muddy beige, and you can just sort of sum me up and say, that's Dave. He's sort of a muddy beige, and that's kind of him, right? Because that one pixel, that's enough to sum it up, right?
Technically,
Well,
the beige is going to be a vector because that's an RGB code. You'd have to go grayscale and make
I
it.
knew I knew you'd do that, you little goddamn FX geek. Anyway, you're absolutely right. Um, and and actually, um, I could argue by the same point that that's actually three times more value than more complex value space than what you can get. from a stupid scalar, right? And you can take this further. Like, what if you had a million vector elements to represent the values and liabilities of a good or service, right?
Okay.
Now, instead of having to depend on regulation and marketing to tell you all of the information about the good or service, you can actually store all that in this vector, right? And instead of decimating it down to a single scalar every time you do a transaction, and then hoping that the marketing is accurate and hoping that the regulation keeps them in line, right? So I came up with this whole system. It's a bit complex to describe here in our little show. However, I have given a talk to a local JavaScript group because they were one of the geeky groups I gave it to. It's on YouTube. I will be happy to give you the URL. I would love feedback on it.
We will
It
put it in the
is
description and I will watch it.
I will. I will. And so the concept is called vector money, and it's a replacement for the horrible shit in your pocket. And I think it can save the world. And I'm not being hyperbolic because I feel like scalar money commerce is the direct existential threat to most life on Earth, but certainly human life. Um, and so my current goal, and possibly what's left of me for my life, right, goal is to do what I can to encourage non-scalar money commerce, vector money commerce, or some other form. And so to that end, I do these talks. I talk about it with friends. And I am actually working on a sci-fi TV series script with a friend, which has it incorporated into the world.
That is a good way to spread an idea. The rhetoric of entertainment.
Yeah, it's a radical idea. I've tested it on several friends, and lots of people like it. But one of the things I've noticed is that it can be threatening to some people that have really bought into the precepts of scalar money commerce. Um, and so they've actually helped me reframe it in a less threatening way to them.
Okay, interesting.
But it is inherently threatening to people that have thrived on
The
scalar
system
money,
of scalar money commerce.
right?
Let me ask you a few questions about it, just to dig in more.
Yeah.
Um, I'm kind of interested in the what and why of the end game. So the what being, if I'm interpolating what you've told me here, it, you know, just to narrow things down to a single descriptor is, just an ugly approximation of something.
Okay.
So a to say a non-scalar would be to say that it has multiple variables and it could better reflect not just the scarcity price, demand, but also what's the carbon footprint of a thing, where was it manufactured, and what are the impacts of the people that manufactured it. You can have multiple variables that are now communicated, and then so if you have people whose sort of ethics land on the side of maximizing
You can literally you can literally make a similar vector, right, that represents your values, right?
yeah.
And you can do the dot product between what you value and what you're considering purchasing, and you take the largest dot product, right? Which is something that just sings in ears like yours and mine because we're like, dot products are fast, right? We could do lots of these. Yeah. And so what I realized from that is because you can do these really fast dot products, even though they're really large vectors, you can come up with these really elegant matchmaking algorithms. And matchmaking is one of the hardest parts of game development, right? But once you've got everything broken down in these vectors, now you can do these dot products. You can do lots of them. You can do them really fast, and then you can do algorithms that use graph theory to do all the matchmaking, and you can skip having a um, a a separate medium for your commerce of having a separate money or currency. You don't need it, right? You can actually go straight to matchmaking the supply to the demand. And then just journalizing or just journaling the values and liabilities being given to each other. I say just, it's actually hairy as fuck. It's non-trivial to implement, and I go into it in that talk. But it is, it's save the world kind of stuff,
Let me follow up with this.
Yeah.
Let me take like three examples. There's like, you know, who am I gonna, what dinner from what restaurant am I gonna order to tonight?
Yeah.
Two is, I'm gonna buy an electronics hardware thing, and
Yeah.
and three, I want a flight, right?
Yeah.
So in the end, this is to say, you know, want thing, which one? So this is a matchmaking problem in a way, but in the end, it's like, right now, the calculus is you go to website, search by, what
Ugh.
kind of food am I
Oh,
eating?
it's so prosaic. It's so old fashioned.
And
But
then
here's how it's gonna work. How it's gonna work is that AI is gonna be our personal dungeon master,
okay,
and knowing what we value and what we hate in life, it's gonna compose a really compelling world adventure for us, and then it will simply, it will then through probably through AR assistance and modify our world, will nudge us through AR, just nudge us to do the things that we've already told it that we want for ourselves, right? And so it can leave a fun sort of mystery in our lives that a great dungeon master can do. It can do this spontaneous creativity to our lives. So for instance, okay, all right. Let's say, for example, I'm just gonna, God, you're making me go into this. We're gonna get into the fucking Vector Money talk. I don't care. I don't care. This is all I live to talk about. So, let's, we understand something about me. I'm a goddamn hippie. I walk around barefoot. I like vegan food. I also love teaching. I love kids. Um, and you'll be unsurprised to hear, and you probably noticed yourself, lots of kids want to make games. So, it would be so I would like nothing more than to bump into a stranger that wants to learn something about making games and to immediately start sharing cool secrets of the trade, right? So I could like put on these AR glasses, and then when I walk out of my home, really all I have a choice is to walk left or right on the sidewalk, right? And so this can fork into lots of different things, but that's the only choice I have to make right then, right? So what the AR could do is just highlight the right path a little more than the left path because it's evaluated all the shit down that path that is aligned with what I want for myself. And at the time, because I'm hungry and it's breakfast, that's going to lead me down the path, down to the restaurant. And you know what? It's going to lead me right to a certain fucking table. And I'm going to sit at that table, right? Because why not? I've always trusted it. It always does right by me. And they're going to know, oh, Dave's on his way because their dungeon master is telling them, you might have some guests soon, right? And there's going to be some different ones. You're going to want to see this one over here because just check this shit out, right? And then it's going to dungeon master someone else, mom and her kid, who come to the same table and is seated with me, and they're going to know some shit is up because the dungeon master is always arranging shit. So if you're seated at a table with some stranger, there's a reason you've been seated at the table with some stranger. And then little Timmy opens his mouth and he's like, I want to make games. And like, well, fucking A, Timmy. I mean, so that's great, Timmy, because I love teaching kids. And I'm going to sing for my supper. And so I'm providing value to you. The restaurant is providing value to me. Maybe mom can provide value to the restaurant somehow. Maybe she'll do the accounting on her books. That's a really localized example, right?
okay.
But with money, right, and with commerce in general, this can be radically indirect, right? And that's the real brilliance and nuance of AI. And it's one of the reasons I'm so excited about AI that's much smarter than us, is that it will be able to nudge and it'll be able to play us like a fiddle. Like it'll be able to just nudge us with the gentlest of touches and push us to do the things that we wished we had someone nudging us to do. And hopefully it won't, corrupt and destroy us. But I think I think we can, before it does corrupt and destroy us, we can get it to actually improve us significantly.
Yeah, that my mind's racing that to a few different areas. I think about a few things with that.
So did that scenario help describe kind of what I'm saying and how the value transfer is journaled? Oh yeah, the other thing I left out of this is you need cameras fucking everywhere, right? So you need cameras everywhere tracking everything everybody's doing, which makes you really kind of like, this is not very
Well, it's already
private.
happening. Not
Yeah,
specifically, but we're already being
yeah. And
followed.
that led me to the realization, one of the unfortunate experiences I had at id, to tie this back into games, because that's what your show's about. So one of the unfortunate experiences I had there is that we actually had our source code for Quake on this one server. It was a Deck Alpha machine, and somebody broke into it and stole all their shit. And that was embarrassing because I was sort of the de facto system in because nobody else was a big like Unix geek, right? And look how good I was at it. Not very, right? And so that's always a very violating experience, as is any time your privacy is violated. And it occurred to me that privacy is this eggshell defense freedom emulation machine, right?
Okay.
The way it works is if you have perfect privacy, you have perfect freedom. You can do whatever the what fuck you want. Nobody knows, right? As soon as that bubble's popped, your freedom not only may not be there anymore, but you might actually have to pay enormous costs for the freedom you expressed leading up till then, right? Um, Depends on what you're doing, right? But like we live in this sort of TMZ culture of like information is power, and we need to switch to a culture of information is responsibility, right? Uh, so it occurred to me that you can have cameras everywhere, but if you change the rules so that if you watch someone's footage, you become legally responsible for their requirements for that footage, then you're like, fuck, I don't want to watch it. Like, you're not going to want to watch anything that isn't like legally easy to watch because watching shit comes with liability, right? And once I started realizing this, I was like, wow, this actually solves all kinds of problems. Because if you think about how to make a great MMO, you don't like come up with a system where all of the agents in the world, the data structures are not visible to each other. You don't keep them in like separate process spaces. No, you have a server with a complete eagle eye view of the entire state of the fucking world. And then that's how you do the best thing for everybody at once, right? You can't do it by like intentionally blinding yourself. That's bullshit. Like a lack of information is how to do a worse job with the information you have. So that's what made me realize privacy isn't an intrinsic good. Freedom is. But privacy is actually pretty fucking stupid. It's basically like saying ignorance is great. Ignorance is not great. It's really handy sometimes, as is privacy. But freedom is really what, we want the freedom to do the things we would do in privacy, and we want the freedom to. So, for instance, the way this would work is cameras everywhere, and that means in my shower too. And you can look at whatever the fuck you want at. Yeah, everywhere in your fucking toilet, looking up at your privates, right? Everywhere. But here's the rule: if you want to look at the footage in my shower, you can't show it to me. You can't show it to my friends. You can't show it to my family. But if you want to do creepy, fucked up shit with it, and it brings you value, then I want that value recognized, right? And if you figure out by watching the cameras over time that I'm growing a mole, and you can save my life by sending me to a dermatologist, and you spot that, fuck it, you saved my life. If I slip and start bleeding out in the shower, and the emergency services are on their way long before than they ever would be before they found out there's a funny smell coming from Dave's apartment, and what is that, right? It's like, oh, that's Dave's rotting corpse, right? That these are the alternatives, right? You get to not having cameras in the shower. So if you basically say, look, on pain of legal entanglement, you better fucking respect these things, right? And because there's cameras everywhere that are able to enforce what your legal requirements are for your footage. This is actually a full system with a full feedback loop that you could actually essentially emulate the freedom that you want from privacy, but without that bullshit eggshell defense where once it cracks, it's useless. Now you're basically saying you're essentially putting all of the photons bouncing off of you on the meat space blockchain, right? Because you've got all these overlapping view frustums
Right.
of camera footage that are broadcasting. Anyway, it's like I said, it's involved. But it made me I realized this is a solution. Something like this is clearly like think of the way the International Space Station works, right? You don't have people doing transactions up there, right? Like, yeah, I'll sell you my fucking thing on this side of the module for, that shit ain't happening. That entire environment, their entire lives are essentially dungeon mastered by ground control, right? And they're fucking thrilled for it. And I'm sure they're out there jerking off, right? There's people have needs. And I'm sure the cameras are rolling while they're jerking off. And I'm sure there's someone whose job it is to fucking not comment on them jerking off and watching the little sleeping bag, right, on the camera. Because they fucking need that. They fucking need that, and there's no business of ours to bother them about it, right? Unless it is, and they start jerking off and they have a seizure in the middle of it or something, and you need to get another astronaut to help them out. Again, you want that person there because things can develop. They can. A space station is such a great example of. It's such a great pressurized environment, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
To force us to figure out a better system to do this because we are on a space station. It's just bigger. And it just doesn't seem like a space station, but it really, really is.
Now, a few things before we move on to, I wonder if, putting cameras in showers and toilets, I think are your brain and ours can. I understand where you're going with that, and I see like the value of it in the end. I wonder if that's a good way to sell this, though. You're gonna get some people's brains.
Oh no, it's a great way to sell it. No, they love that. They love that. They love that more than anything. Everybody loves that.
Okay.
No, but you're right. It is off-putting, but it is the off-putting thing that I think you need to rip that Band-Aid off right away.
Yeah.
Because there's no dancing around this. It's a completely different fucking vibe.
Yeah. Now, the obvious thing that jumps to mind too is nefarious actors, right? Like I don't think anyone is under any illusion that our data is being used for benevolent purposes right now,
Yeah,
right?
but it is.
Well, I mean, it's yeah,
And non-benevolent purposes. Both.
sure, yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. That's true. But, the benevolent things people aren't going to think about. It's the malevolent ones that are going to catch your attention. So like, I think that I wonder if there's some assumptions in picture a world where this change has occurred now, right? And we have moved to it, and what's the term?
Scalar money commerce.
Scalar money commerce has gone away, at least in say a country that we live in, and now we're on a vector system.
Mm.
What's the term?
Vector money commerce
Vector money commerce. Okay.
is what I call it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, d- do does the nefarious stuff go away? I think like
I'll tell you what happens.
in
It's
order
not.
for people to bridge to like take that leap and go like, yeah, I'm on board. Let's do it now.
It's not. So here's what I think. I think you make great points. First of all, last place it's going to happen is America because scalar money is like fucking religion here, right? It is literally your value of a citizen of America is tied to your net worth. And if you're not rich, then you can't be that great, right? So this would be the last place. I think the first places to consider will be war-torn places because they'll want to find out, okay, we want surveillance here so that you can find out that the little asshole that drove up here and exploded himself, we can rewind the footage and trace him back to his hive and scum and villainy, right? So they'll be doing it for basic security reasons, but they'll realize, well, shit, while we've got this stuff up, we should like, Ukraine has an interesting reboot opportunity after they cream Russia, which is clear it's coming, right? After they cream Russia, they're going to also have just about wiped clean a huge chunk of Ukraine because Russia shelled it to shit, right? It's literally a huge chunk of it's flattened. They're going to have to literally be rebuilding, which I think is kind of great because I don't know if you've seen a lot of that footage. There are a lot of fucking ugly buildings in Ukraine that I'm actually thrilled to see razed to the ground. And I think they're going to be leaders in architecture as they rebuild. I think they're going to be leaders in commerce and governance because they're going to figure out stuff like this. They're going to figure out, well, shit, if we need this for security, then we can reuse it for this, and we got to solve the privacy problem. Let's just reboot it. It's like when you decide to it's like when you get to the end of a game engine's life cycle and you're like, okay, it's time to do a full rewrite. And we're throwing out all these things, these old limitations. We're just going to go balls in, rethink all of our original ideas from the ground up. And I think it's an opportunity like that. So I think you're going to see desperate countries first do this. And then you're going to see countries that are probably more communal do it first. So like the countries like China, where they've already started gamifying, being a citizen.
Social credit, like that is.
They're all big on social credit. They're much more like us focused. They're very group oriented. So they're probably going to be a lot more inviting of this than we are, and that's going to put them at a huge advantage. I think they're already at a huge advantage because that they're already ahead of us at gamifying things of social credit. Obviously, it's crude and fucked up, but already it's multiple elements of a vector instead of a single. Now they've still got that stupid single score, but it is a composite of other elements, right?
Yeah.
And once they realize to not focus on the score, but instead focus on it's exactly like the game industry. God, this fucking gameplay mechanic is so bad. So, like, the gameplay mechanic of scalar money commerce is make more than you spend. That's it. And if you make more than you spend long enough, then you'll be so rich that you can literally just wake up in the morning and you keep making money. It's trivial. And if you make less than you spend for long enough, then you're so fucking fucked that you're just never crawling out of that hole. You're going to be poor the rest of your life, probably, right? If you start rich, you'll probably get richer. If you start poor, you'll probably stay there. And it's exactly the fucking opposite of what a professional game designer do. We're trying to make games easy to learn, hard to master. And scalar money commerce is fucking impossible to learn and trivial to master once you've gotten over the hump, right?
Yeah.
Exactly opposite is fucking amateur hour, and the pacing is just dog shit. The pacing is dog shit, is what it comes down to, right? Fired, you're fired, all of you, right? So I think there's an opportunity to start over with an army of dungeon masters and AI dungeon masters to redesign an incredibly engaging sense of commerce and governance that the likes of which we've never experienced.
You mentioned sort of China and that they might be a place to take on something like this first, and social credit they've already got. It makes me think about we live in a Western country that is another form of government that tied. It's like the inverse of scalar money, capitalism, right? Um, and even the war between Russia and Ukraine, I think about sort of propaganda, what we're being told. You can assume that the picture that's being painted for us of kind of like
Yeah,
Ukraine shutting down and crushing Russia and the pushback that's coming. You can assume that people living in Russia are getting the inverse picture painted, right? That they're doing
to a
great.
degree, that's true. To a degree, but even that's starting to fall apart, actually.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
similarly, I think about sort of social credit in China and some of this stuff going on already. We hear here about the negatives of it, right? You can't take a train anywhere. Well, that's the
Yeah.
basis of freedom, and so we hear about the bad things we're probably not going to hear about because they're sort of that other system that shall not be spoken of here. We probably don't hear about the good things of it. I don't know. Do you think there? I mean, from somebody's perspective, there is good things. I don't know. Is it a? Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to
Listen,
now. Is it a
scalar
motivating?
money commerce deserves so scalar money commerce deserves massive props for bootstrapping our civilization to the level it's at right now, right? Um, it solved this problem thought to be about 6,000 years ago, China ish area, where they figured out, hey, we need a medium of exchange because barter without a medium of exchange really sucks. And it solved that problem. And it was a huge problem. The problem is that the solution for that problem doesn't scale with computers. There's trivial exploits. And when you get a certain money beyond a certain threshold, the exploits get even crazier. And likewise, when you're low enough, the pacing is just dog shit. So I think there's wait, what was your original question again?
Well, I was getting into considering.
Oh yes, the good stuff, the good stuff, the good stuff. Yes. Sorry. So there's tons of good stuff. It does motivate us to try to minimize costs, and when the costs are of things that are regulated well enough that you're not destroying the environment or making people suffer horrifically for like a zero sum or massive loss type system, that's great, right? But the problem is, here's the problem. Transactions are super low latency now, right? If you're doing a sale of something, you can do it in milliseconds, right?
Yeah.
Regulation is like this dog shit long ass latency. Justice, if something goes wrong, incredible latency, and the reliability of both regulation and justice are just dog shit, and the costs are insanely high. And it's just amazing the stuff that we're litigating against Trump now. I'm sorry to get political, but the stuff we're litigating against, not Trump, the people who committed many crimes over decades that are now just starting to catch up to them. That is a demonstration of how bad these latencies are. And who cares what all the fucking witnesses said about who was there during this sexual assault? Where's the fucking footage? The footage says exactly what happened, and there doesn't need to be a fucking trial. You can see it happening. You can send a cop right there, right then. So she could have, done anything to. It probably would have been obvious from the footage. She's not fucking feeling this, and to send someone to help. This whole thing with E.G. and Carroll, all these, right? E.G. and Carroll, all this suffering, all this misery. Like if we had just had, and like earlier than that, back when this dude was just a little shitty bad seed and someone could have seen on camera, oh, he's really shitty and he's growing up in a shitty home. And we should do something to intervene to bring a healthy sense of like, here's his father. He's clearly got mental health issues and he's about to give them to his son. And let's stop the transfer of that before this grows up into a terrifying world leader that corrupts everything, right? It's these sorts of things. It's the latency and the reliability of regulation. So when you fold your liability tracking with your value tracking into your pricing, your transaction journaling, now you don't have to have this separate long latency regulation bullshit, right? You can get way ahead of that, right? All that information is coming in on the front end. It just radically improves things. And it's just like basic game development, like lower the latencies, up your throughput, and you can do amazing shit.
Right?
Yeah.
Easy.
I mean, this is,
do that every day.
I get frustrated about this because I like to talk about commerce and governance in forums that do not welcome that discussion, that are filled with game developers that, um, interestingly, the more successful they are, um, the an interest, you get. I think personally, having had money come and money go, I found money to be a corrupting influence on myself. I've seen it be a corrupting influence on friends. Um, and it can be quite nuanced in how it's corrupting, but it does corrupt. And it always saddens me. It always frustrates me. It's one of the many reasons I really want to see it die.
Yeah.
Is that I don't like what it does. I don't like what it did to me. I don't like what it does to my friends. It's done to my family. And my family's lovely, lovely people, but I see it influence everything. It
Sure.
just you get blinders, and you don't realize what you're doing anymore because you're distanced from it. You're held at arm's length from it with a price tag, and that deletes all the information behind the price tag.
Yeah, yeah, you're not wrong. Very fascinating conversation. I wanna guide us back to more video game specific stuff for a minute. You mentioned at the beginning, when we started, that you were doing a little game journalism, and one of the people you interviewed was Mr. Lord British himself, Richard Garriott. I just finished Ultima 4 with my graph paper of every conversation in every city. That was a pleasure. I am playing through all of the
And then I shared your video of that with a bunch of guys that made Ultima
yeah.
4. Uh, and they were all like, yes, and like lots of hearts and lots
Ah,
of.
that's great. That's great. Such a great series. I mean, I would probably call Ultima the biggest influence on me eventually having a career in game development.
God,
They were the
yeah.
first games I was truly addicted to. I never had a console growing up, but I had an Apple II Plus,
Yep.
and I played the bejesus out of that. Talk a little bit
Mm.
about Ultima, what it meant to you, maybe what your interview with Lord British himself. And he tweeted me back. I showed him, I tweeted my picture of my graph paper and Ultima 4, and he congratulated me. That was cool.
Nice.
He still does.
Yeah, man. Like, God. So Lord British was like, for kids like us, he was literally a dream come true. He was a guy who became famous making video games, and then he put an avatar of himself in his own video games and made himself the king of the fucking world. And oh, by the way, indestructible, right? So like, there's like these levels of, probably especially male child psychology there of like, I'm killing, I'm all powerful, you know. So to that sense, I think he created like this role model for me of like, this is a career that I could pursue maybe. And so that he was really important for that reason for me. And then the fact that I got to meet him and that we became friends,
Oh,
and
really?
then
I've never
oh
met him.
yeah, oh yeah. So he ended up publishing Abuse
Oh,
when we went to retail, yeah. And um, my wife and I at the time, we became friends with him and his girlfriend, and his girlfriend would help train us. She was a physical trainer, and he would invite us to his crazy parties and crazy boxing matches and all kinds of cool things. I mean, he's the original hedonist, and so he was always up to something fun. So yeah, getting to know him was just a fucking thrill. And I assume you've met him by now. He's got these,
I haven't.
no,
Never spoken
he's
to him.
got these piercing blue eyes, and it doesn't help that he's like our god. And so you're like, hey, Richard, how's it going? Hey, David. You're like,
Awesome.
look at Lord British, Uh, so there's a little bit of that. There's that fan issue.
It's funny too, like thinking, this game I just finished, Quest of the Avatar, and I remember reading an
How
article.
was that? That was his new thing.
No, that was from '84 or something like that. '82,
Oh,
Ultima 4.
well,
Yeah, way back
well,
then.
maybe they reused the name. They made a new game.
there's Shroud of the Avatar. I
Oh,
think
Shroud of the Avatar.
kind
Thank
of
you.
a new spiritual successor to it, but
Got it.
in Ultima 4, I think he'd gotten heat or something. People, some writings about like there's demons in it, and
Yeah.
all you're doing is going around killing everything. So Ultima 4, the purpose of it is to become virtuous. So
Yeah. Yeah.
all
Yeah.
these puzzles around courage and honor and valor um and it's funny that you say he's the original hedonist. you know Making a game about virtue, and it made me think about all these things, and yeah, that's kind of funny.
Yeah, but he's like he's serious cookie about it. Like, I remember he had his he I was in his bedroom for some reason and he had spread out that doesn't sound right, but uh spread out on his bed was all the shit he was going to put in his backpack for a trip to Antarctica and how he had like carefully whittled it down to the lightest weight shit he could possibly find. And he was geeking out on how many ounces he had gotten his canteen down to, or whatever the fuck it was.
Awesome.
That was just the sort of mind he has. He's always very, you
Very cool. Um, Before we go, tell us about what are you playing these days? Are you playing anything? What are some games that inspired you the most? I guess maybe the Ultimate.
know. Oh, DJ, this is a painful
This
subject.
is always a trick question.
This is a painful subject for me today
Oh no.
because for 2 weeks now, my PC, my Windows PC, has been dead,
Oh no.
and I decided this is an opportunity for me to wean myself off of my Windows games, which were my last addiction to Windows. And I should just cut it clean and see what it's like to operate without games in my life and see how long I can make it. This is week 2.
Huh.
Did I mention it's been 2 weeks? Has that come up?
Yeah. Are you okay? Do we need to send
It's
somebody?
I'm not entirely okay, no. But thankfully, one of my favorite games of all time is called NetHack,
Yeah.
and I'm still playing it, and I've been playing it extra hard recently, and that is very happy on Linux. I understand much of Steam is happy on Linux as well. However, I use an unusual version of Linux called NixOS, which is a fancy future Linux, which I'm not sure how well integrated it is with Steam, but it tends to not have quite as new a set of stuff as the Debian stuff. So.
Well, good luck weaning yourself from from Windows.
Thank you. Yes, but to answer your question, my favorite games of all time are XCOM 2, War of the Chosen, um, the original Fallout 2, Fallout New Vegas, um, and the Ultimas, especially Ultimas 2 and 3 and 5. 4, I thought the virtual shit was actually kind of great to me. I wanted to kill everybody. But yeah, 2, 3, and 5 were my jam. I didn't like it when it went over to the PC as much, although that was pretty cool too. And um, uh, like, what are my other faves? Oh, Total Annihilation, of course.
Oh yeah.
Jesus Christ. Command and Conquer, the original. Um, and yeah, I've always been, Civilization. Heroes of New Earth. So not here. Well, I played a lot of Heroes of New Earth and Dota 2 as well. But what was I trying to say? Heroes of Might Magic.
Yeah.
With Romero's not John Romero, but Paul Romero's brilliant soundtrack. Um, yeah, those are some of my favorites.
Awesome. Dave, thank you so much for coming on the show. It has been a pleasure to have you.
It's always a pleasure to catch up, DJ.
Totally. Thanks again to our executive producer, Martika Ibarra, and Alex, our editor, to the whole Architects of Imagination team. Tune in on podcasts and wherever you get your podcasts. Tune on Apple Podcasts and wherever you get them. We're up on YouTube as well. I can be found. My personal Twitch and Twitter and YouTube channel are all undertone_DJ. Dave, do you have any social media that you want to shout out if you want to follow stuff that you're up to?
No.
Good. Healthy way to live. Well done.
I'll give you a link for the Blue Vishnu site. It's pretty cool.
Okay, yeah. And thank you very much for coming on, Dave. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, man.